Night one of the WWE Draft. Very boring night one of the draft. Now, the rules are we had 4 rounds on Friday on SmackDown. We had 8 picks for SmackDown, 8 picks for Raw. Tomorrow night on Raw, we're going to have 6 rounds with 12 picks per brand. The champions, and this is maybe the biggest change in the draft this year from past ones. Champions are draft ineligible. They are draft protected. With the exception of the women's tag team champions, Asuka and Kairi saying they can float between shows, and then whenever they lose their titles, which could be as soon as next weekend, then they would have to be locked into whatever brand they're a part of. But, again, I agree with the idea to protect the champions. The champions should have some kind of protection, some kind of immunity here. And it would have been dumb to make most of the Raw belts look the same and then shift them over to the other show. That wouldn't have made any sense. The other rule is that the rosters will officially lock as of Raw next Monday. So that's coming out of the Backlash pay-per-view. Let me go round by round here. For those of you who may have missed it, I'll give my thoughts here. Round number 1 to open the draft. The number 1 draft pick for 2024 goes to SmackDown, and it was Bianca Belair. Raw picked up Jey Uso, SmackDown picked up Carmelo Hayes from NXT, and Raw picked up Seth Rollins. Carmelo Hayes getting called up, not a surprise. We already saw him make a bunch of appearances on SmackDown in the last few months before WrestleMania. He was a babyface at that point. Since then, he underwent a heel turn in NXT. He wrestled Trick Williams. He is more than ready to be called up to the main roster. That was sort of like a test run for it. And so him being called up, great move. They put him in a main event already on Friday, non-title, of course, against Cody Rhodes. And there was an unfortunate spot that I'm still hoping we haven't gotten an update. They haven't said anything about it. I hope that's a good sign. But there was a spot near the end of that match on Friday night where they went for springboard cutters at the exact same time, or some kind of springboard move. Cody does the Cody cutter. I don't know what Hayes was going for, maybe a clothesline, but they were going for springboard moves simultaneously. The only thing is, Cody was either moving too slow or Carmelo was moving too fast. I think it was a combination of both. They didn't time it well. And Hayes launched himself before Cody, so he went one way and he crashed to the mat. Cody went the other way and he crashed, but he had a much harder landing than Carmelo Hayes did. Carmelo Hayes went chest first, face first, down into the mat. Cody landed right on his shoulder. Very awkwardly and very hard, because he was trying for a Cody cutter and there was nobody there. So had it worked, it probably would have been a pretty spectacular move, but it did not work. And Cody was selling pain. Now, how much of that was selling and how much of that was real pain, we don't know. Cody's been tweeting and, he seems to be okay. I don't know if he's made any public appearances, since Friday night. I don't know. I hope he's okay. They could ill afford to lose him to a major injury right now. That would be a catastrophe. So hopefully he's fine. Seth Rollins going to Raw. That was very obvious with Becky Lynch being frozen there now that she's the women's champion on Raw. But why is Seth Rollins eligible to be drafted? He just underwent surgery to repair a torn meniscus, probably going to be gone for many months. Why is he eligible to be drafted while he's hurt? And CM Punk is eligible, as he will be tomorrow night, to be drafted, and he's hurt. And yet Rhea Ripley is not eligible to be drafted at all. She's not listed. We have the pool coming up tomorrow night. Finn Balor, Dominic Mysterio, JD McDonough. All the remaining members of the Judgment Day outside of Damian Priest, who is protected, they're all eligible to be drafted together as a group. No Rhea Ripley. Why is that? That makes no sense. Round number 2. SmackDown picked up Randy Orton and Nia Jax. Raw picked up Braun Breaker and Liv Morgan. Randy Orton needs to be on SmackDown. It's a good spot for him to be because I want to see him and Cody Rhodes at some point have a program together. That can't happen if they're not on the same show. So Orton being on SmackDown, I would have made the same move. Liv Morgan needs to be on Raw for when Rhea Ripley eventually returns. And I also think there's a very good chance she's going to end up with that women's world title soon anyway. So that's fine. That makes sense to me. In a pool with AJ Styles and LA Knight, who at this point still had not been drafted, Nick Aldis selects Nia Jax. And I know why they did it. They just wanted to keep balance with the men's and the women's. 2 men's picks, 2 women's picks. But there was no rule about this. There's no rule that says you have to have an even number of picks based on gender for each round. If I'm the general manager, I want the people who are going to make the strongest roster for me. How do you leave LA Knight and AJ Styles for Raw to potentially pick up, and you go with Nia Jax instead? That's one of those moves that just had me scratching my head. Braun Breaker was another one. Braun Breaker. They went through this whole thing with Braun Breaker being recruited by Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce. He had 2 different contracts. He was trying to decide which brand he wanted to sign with. This was only in the last 2 months. Why they even bothered to do this before WrestleMania? Braun didn't even have a match on the show. I have no idea. He was still one half of the tag team champions with Baron Corbin in NXT. You know, there was a time where they would wait until that week after, the Raw after, the SmackDown after WrestleMania to debut somebody new, call somebody up. That would have made more sense, but they did this whole thing, and finally he made his decision. He signed with SmackDown. They had a whole contract signing in the aisleway with him and Nick Aldis on SmackDown. I think it was back in February, or maybe even last month. I don't remember exactly what week it was. Why was Braun Breaker eligible to be drafted at all? But I do understand them wanting to keep Braun and Mello on different shows. I just would have sent Carmelo Hayes to Raw and kept Braun Breaker on SmackDown. So that was very stupid. Round number 3. SmackDown picks up LA Knight and the Bloodline. Yes, round 3. The Bloodline finally gets drafted. The Bloodline consisting of Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Paul Heyman. No Roman Reigns, because Roman Reigns withdrew his eligibility at the beginning of SmackDown Friday night. Paul Heyman made the announcement. Roman is not going to be back for a while, and so therefore he has pulled himself from the draft. But still, the entire Bloodline staying put on SmackDown. Raw also picks up Sheamus. So Sheamus and Ricochet is what Raw gets in round number 3. LA Knight staying on SmackDown. Now he could challenge Logan Paul in these next few months for the United States Championship. That's a good spot for him to be in. Sheamus to Raw, kind of a similar thing. Now he goes where the Intercontinental title is going to be. And now may not be the right time. Maybe later in the year, maybe WrestleMania next year. But there is a story there. For all the talk about Cody Rhodes finishing his story, Sheamus, it's a little more low-key, but Sheamus has a story of his own that is going to have to be finished before he retires. And retirement for him is a lot closer than it used to be, especially when he admitted 2 months ago he thought he was going to have to hang up the boots once and for all. He has never won the Intercontinental title. He's talked about how much that means to him. Now he's on the same show with the Intercontinental title. It's the perfect place for him to be. The Bloodline moving so late in the draft, this is going to play into the story in some way. It has to. Otherwise, if you're one of the GMs, right, you would think that when Roman Reigns comes back, whoever gets the Bloodline would have the best chance of landing him. He's still one of their biggest stars. And then round number 4. SmackDown finally picks up AJ Styles, as well as Andrade. Raw picks up the Alpha Academy, which is Chad Gable, Otis, Akira Tozawa, and Maxine Dupree, as well as Kiana James from NXT. So AJ Styles in round number 4, finally. This is the man who is challenging Cody Rhodes. Had a contract signing on Friday with Cody Rhodes to challenge him next weekend for the WWE title, the Undisputed Championship. He is drafted in the final round of night 1. Amazing. Chad Gable staying on Raw, no surprise there. He's going after the Intercontinental title. He has to be on Raw. Andrade now is on SmackDown. So now we know where Charlotte Flair is landing when she comes back. And Kiana James was the female call-up from NXT. And I think that's fine. There's going to be more names coming up tomorrow. They really need another 1 or 2 women from NXT, especially on Raw. But whether they spread them out, I expect more names to be called up. We'll get to that in a second. As announced on social media after the show on Friday, we had more picks. SmackDown picks up the OC, which is Anderson Gallows and Michin. Baron Corbin, who is back from NXT. And the team of Cedric Alexander and Ashanti the Adonis. Raw picks up Shayna Baszler, Zoe Stark, Ivar, and the team of Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. No major surprises at all. after night one of the draft. But if you look at the pool of talent that was eligible on Friday night, I mean, I guess it really shouldn't have been much of a surprise. Maybe I would have sent AJ Styles to Raw, but if they planned to do more than one match with him and Cody, then he had to stay on SmackDown. Now, we have one more night of this tomorrow, and it's a 3-hour show this time. 2 hours was bad enough on Friday. That was a fucking boring show. I hope they've got some big things planned for this thing. Now, Monday's available draft pool looks like this. Here's who's eligible to be drafted. DIY. I don't know if DIY is going heel. There was kind of a tease that might happen after they lost on Monday and Tommaso Ciampa refused to shake the hand of the champions and he walked out. You know, maybe we're going to get a reunion of The Way from NXT. So it depends really. I mean, if they go heel, it's a fresh coat of paint if you keep them on Raw, but they've already lost so many times trying to challenge for those titles. I don't think it matters either way. You know, but if you're going to want to keep all those people together, meaning Gargano, Ciampa, Candice, Indy, they're also eligible to be drafted. They all should be on the same show. So they're probably going to end up staying on Raw. Apollo Crews, Braun Strowman, who is not yet cleared after he had spinal fusion surgery, but he's getting close. Again, I think that he would make for a good challenger for Cody at some point as a heel on the SmackDown roster, but how does he play in, if at all, to this Uncle Howdy stuff? And if there's going to be a new faction, if it's Uncle Howdy and Alexa Bliss and they're bringing back Eric Rowan supposedly, do you involve Braun Strowman in that? Is it a Wyatt 4? Is it a Wyatt 6? I don't know what their plans are for that. It may depend on that. Bronson Reed is eligible. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. CM Punk is eligible to be drafted on Monday. I cannot imagine him leaving Raw and going anywhere that Drew McIntyre is not going to be. He is going to follow where Drew McIntyre goes. Speaking of which, Drew McIntyre is also eligible, and we've got news on Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre has finally signed a new contract with WWE. So finally, contract watch is over, at least for him. PW Insider had some additional notes. They said the two sides finally came to terms only about 2 or 3 days ago on a new deal. And what happened is The Rock posted an Instagram video. And there was a giant sword that was delivered to McIntyre as a gift. I mean, he was sitting with is it his wife or his girlfriend? I don't even know if they're married. I think it's his wife. But they were sitting at a restaurant. All of a sudden, this person comes over bearing gifts. This giant sword, and there was a card, and he looked into the camera. He thanked The Rock. The Rock sent him a sword. I guess they had some kind of a deal. He said, I wish I could be there for it, you know, but he was preoccupied. He couldn't be there physically, but he congratulated Drew on re-signing with WWE. So Rock is the one who broke the news. But Mike Johnson says that video was actually shot well before McIntyre signed his contract so that WWE had something they could roll out once they finalized negotiations. So they already knew, like, this guy's not going anywhere. It's just a matter of, you know, coming up with the right deal, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, getting everything signed, notarized, whatever. And it was a foregone conclusion, because why would Drew McIntyre leave? Drew McIntyre is doing the best work of his career. He's got a ready-made program with CM Punk waiting for him. He's got a pay-per-view coming up in Scotland in June that if he's not in the main event, I think they're out of their mind. He's got no reason to be unhappy with the position that he is in right now in WWE. They're told it's a multi-year deal. Both sides are very happy with it. One source believes the deal is in the area of 3 years, which, if that's the case, he would be locked in until 2027. Now, he is out of the ring right now because he suffered a very badly hyperextended elbow at WrestleMania, and he did work through it. They had a UK tour last week. He was on that tour. He was wrestling. He was on Raw Monday night, although he didn't wrestle there. So I don't know when he'll be back in the ring. It may be a few weeks, but he is nursing that injury. But this is obviously great news. I mean, again, McIntyre has been one of the shining lights on Monday Night Raw for the last 6 months. I look forward to his segments now on TV. I could not have said that before. Drew McIntyre would come out. It was like, kind of boring, nothing going on there. No real intriguing story for him. He comes out there with the sword and everything. It was just, very vanilla, very dull. And he has transformed himself, in my opinion, into a must-see part of that television show. So I'm very happy he's sticking around. The Final Testament is also eligible on Monday to be drafted. Giovanni Vinci, who got booted out of Imperium, which does not bode very well for Giovanni Vinci. The remaining members of Imperium, Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser, are eligible to be drafted together. Jade Cargill. Yeah, Jade Cargill's another one, like Braun Breaker. She just signed with SmackDown weeks ago. Why is she eligible to be drafted? There should be some sort of protection. Anybody who has, quote unquote, signed with a brand in the last 60 days or 90 days should also be protected. But she's not protected, so she's eligible. The Judgment Day, Finn Balor, Dominic Mysterio, and JD McDonough. Caden Carter and Katana Chance. Kevin Owens is eligible to be drafted. I don't know what they're going to do with Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens usually ends up moving in the draft. Kevin Owens right now is involved with the Bloodline. They could blow off his part of that story at Backlash next weekend and then draft him over to the other show. It feels to me like his story with them is not going to be over so quickly. He'll probably stay on SmackDown. Legado del Fantasma is eligible. The LWO is eligible. Naomi, who I would send Naomi to Raw. Natalya, New Catch Republic, New Day, Odyssey Jones from NXT, Pretty Deadly, Shinsuke Nakamura, who I would send to NXT. Yeah, they're losing Baron Corbin. I would send Nakamura down there. Tegan Nox, The Pride, which is Bobby Lashley, The Street Profits, and B-Fab, and Tiffany Stratton are all eligible. Plus, NXT stars will be eligible as well. Ilya Dragunov is a must. I mean, it's got to be a foregone conclusion that Ilya Dragunov, he just lost the NXT Championship. That paves the way for him to be called up. He was on Raw a few weeks ago in a match against Nakamura. So Dragunov is going to get called up. Blair Davenport or Lyra Valkyria. Those are the names I jotted down here. I could see one or both of them being drafted. Again, they need one or two more females to come up. I mean, you can put one on SmackDown, put one on Raw. But I think Blair Davenport and Lyra Valkyria are the ones that I think have the greatest chance of being drafted.